Hey guys, welcome to Crater Mania. I'm your host, the man they call Crater, and I'd like to welcome you guys back to my series here on YouTube, the 500 movies in 2025. For this episode, this will be movies number 190 through 193, and this is also round two of Schwarzenegger versus Stallone. So far, after last night's episode, the score is 1-1. So let's see how it fares tonight. So, and I'm going to keep this kind of short. And before I get into the show, I just want to say I just finished watching Monday Night Raw. If you guys are into wrestling, you like WWE, tonight was a pretty good episode, I think. And a really good match there at the end between Jey Uso and Seth Rollins. Had a lot of fun with that match. I was kind of expecting Punk to show up somewhere in that match. Someone that I was expecting to also be a part of that match, which I was kind of surprised by, was Logan Paul. Because that was something that was not mentioned whatsoever on the show tonight, is that, Logan Paul and Jey Uso are supposed to have a match this Saturday on Backlash for the World Heavyweight Championship. But Logan Paul was not mentioned one time on tonight's episode. So no mention, no promotion of that match this Saturday at Backlash. So very, very strange, I thought. And just kind of out of nowhere, they're already having this world title match between Jey Uso and Seth Rollins. So yeah, I don't know if something changed with Backlash this Saturday. I hadn't seen anything online or anything, anybody talking about it. So I guess maybe we'll find out this Saturday. Also, speaking of this Saturday, I'm going to FrankenCon in Knoxville, Tennessee, with my friend Brad. So I'm super excited about that. Meet some celebrities. A few of them I've already met before, but I like getting more pictures with people, over the years, like Joe Bob, Darcy, Dee Wallace, people like that. There's a couple there I'm going to be meeting that I've not met before, like Kelly Maroney and Danny Pintaro. So yeah, it's gonna be a fun time. And then of course, next Monday, I'm gonna be going to Louisville, Kentucky for Monday Night Raw. So and that's gonna be the first Monday Night Raw after Backlash. So I'm hoping it's gonna be a good one. I'm gonna have a lot of fun regardless. My wife's going, my brother-in-law, and my nephew, we're all gonna be there. It's my nephew's first ever wrestling event he's ever been to. So yeah, gonna have a lot of fun with that. But I guess let's go ahead and jump into tonight's show. This is round two, Schwarzenegger versus Stallone. Again, just to remind you, the score right now is 1-1 after last night's episode. Let's see how everything turns out tonight. So the first movie I'm going to be talking about tonight is a Stephen King adaptation. Well, kind of. This was when he was writing under the name Richard Bachman that he wrote this story. And they adapted this to a film in 1987. And this is The Running Man. So The Running Man is set in this kind of near future dystopia, the year 2017, believe it or not. It's kind of hilarious now, right? Since, we're 8 years past the year 2017, and fortunately for the best, the world did not end up like how it is in The Running Man, because it's in the movie, America has just become this kind of totalitarian state. The population is kind of kept pacified and distracted by watching these brutal state-sponsored game shows on the what's called the ICS network, and the biggest, most popular show on that network is called The Running Man. So the premise to this is very simple. It's also very savage. It's just perfect for an Arnold Schwarzenegger film. These convicted criminals, often wrongly accused people, and I think that's kind of like fits within the story here, are sent into this kind of booby-trapped zone or whatever. Essentially kind of this kind of urban wasteland, and they're hunted down by these kind of professional, heavily armed guys that they call stalkers. And if a runner survives for a certain amount of time, they end up gaining freedom. But spoiler alert, nobody ever survives the Running Man game. The show is hosted by this charismatic, very manipulative, and just utterly despicable guy named Damon Killian, who was played, like, I think, perfectly with this kind of snakish, oily charm from the legendary Richard Dawson, who was ironically famous for being the host of a real life game show, Family Feud. So, enter Ben Richards, played by the man, Arnold Schwarzenegger. And Ben Richards is this decorated state trooper, framed for massacring all these innocent civilians during this riot. It's like for food. It's a food riot. And this was, this incident, Ben Richards, he refused to fire upon this crowd, even though that was the orders he was given. So he's sent to this really brutal labor camp, and he ends up staging this escape with some fellow inmates. And naturally, Ben Richards is the nation's most wanted man. So the ICS network and Damon Killian, they see this as a golden opportunity, because the public loves a former hero fallen from grace. So Killian strong arms Richards into becoming the star runner on the show, promising him that freedom if he survives. So the core of the movie is Ben Richards, accompanied by a couple fellow runners, including Maria Alonso, who plays Amber Mendez. And she's reluctant to be on Ben's side at first, but she eventually joins his cause after she sees how manipulative the network and Damon and all that is with society, basically. So they're trying to survive this whole gauntlet, of that zone while being hunted by Killian's stable of these kind of colorful, over the top stalkers. And some of these stalkers, like Sub-Zero, who is a hockey themed killer with this razor sharp like hockey stick. Buzzsaw, who's this like biker with a chainsaw, his demise, ironically, provides one of the film's most iconic lines. Then there's Dynamo, who's like this opera singing sadist, and he has like a go-kart, and he can shoot electricity. Fireball, who's this kind of like pyromaniac, armed with flamethrowers and rockets, and he's got like a jetpack and all this. And then there's Captain Freedom, played by Jesse Ventura. He's like this muscle-bound, former runner turned stalker, and it's very cool. He may just be like a wrestler. So I'm not really that sure. It seems like they did mention that he was like the former runner that turned into a stalker, but I could be getting that mixed up. But the film follows Ben Richards as he outsmarts and outfights and outmuscles each of these stalkers. Just gradually kind of making his way towards the ICS network studio itself to expose Killian and the network's lies and manipulation. So the action in this is very relentless, and the kills are satisfyingly brutal. Even for a PG-13 movie in the 80s. And just the dialogue here is just pure, I think, cheesy goodness. It's gold, especially when it's delivered by Arnold. I mean, it doesn't get any better than that. But it really is high concept, action flick, with this kind of surprisingly sharp satirical, edge to it that kind of lurks beneath all the explosions and the one-liners and everything. Um, but the director here of The Running Man is Paul Michael Glazer. And if that name sounds familiar to you, especially in a very different context, that's because Paul Michael Glazer is primarily known for his acting career, particularly for playing Starsky in the hugely popular 1970s TV series Starsky and Hutch. Um, so Glazer, he transitioned into directing later in his career, and working mostly in television initially before taking on the Running Man film. And I think the Running Man is arguably the most prominent film that he directed. But there were other directorial credits that he had, like a movie called Band of the Hand, and The Air Up There. But I've not seen either of those. I just saw that those were films that he did when I was doing research on him for this video. So maybe I might check those out at some point. I mean, I really like The Running Man. I thought he did a great job with it. So maybe he's got some other good ones as well. I think The Air Up There, is that the movie? It's like the basketball movie. I think Kevin Bacon's in it, maybe. Um, Seems like I remember seeing the cover of that on the VHS when I was a kid. Um, and he's done numerous other episodes of like TV shows throughout the 80s and 90s and all that, like Miami Vice and a few other things like that. But from a fan's perspective, I think what matters is whether he let Arnold shine, and the answer is a resounding yes. Yeah, in this case. So Glazer's direction in The Running Man is just very straightforward, and it keeps that pace moving. Um, he frames Arnold effectively, I believe. Just kind of gives the stalkers in the film this kind of distinct visual flair for each one. And even if it's kind of campy, it allows the action sequences, room to breathe, and and for Arnold to kind of dispatch all these guys very creatively in different ways. Um, and Paul Michael Glazer, while he might not be known as a visionary action director or anything, like James Cameron, John McTiernan, or people like that, I still think he delivered a very highly entertaining and coherent B movie spectacle that kind of perfectly served its star here in Arnold in this case. And it's this whole wild premise, and he knew what the audience wanted from an Arnold movie, shot in 1987. And so I think he definitely delivered the goods here. I know that this movie has a huge fan base out there. There are some people that consider it as one of Arnold's best movies. It's definitely up there for me. I don't know if I would put it, like in my top 10. I'm maybe top 10. I don't know. I'd have to think about it. But as far as like top 5, I don't think so. But I'm not. That's not discrediting it in any way. I still love this movie very much. But I just say that because there are so many films out there that Arnold has done that I really love. So it would be tough for me to figure out where to put this one. But as far as like the legacy and the impact that this movie has had, like I said, there's a huge fan base for this. And this is where I think The Running Man really gets really interesting beyond just being a rad, Arnold movie, a really cool Arnold movie. It's the legacy and the impact are very surprisingly significant, especially when you look back from today's perspective. So when this was made in 1987, long before TV reality shows like Survivor, The Bachelor, or whatever, um, and just that whole explosion of reality television and streaming and all that. The Running Man envisioned entertainment built around human suffering and public humiliation and just manipulation of the truth for ratings. And just that whole idea of this charismatic host controlling public perception through carefully edited broadcasts and manufactured drama. It just feels very like eerie, because the movie predicted a future where entertainment, was kind of blurred the lines between reality and fiction. Where audiences became desensitized to violence, and they were welcoming this violence, and just like they were seeing these people get killed on a reality TV show, and it's like it didn't bother them, and it's just these media corporations just kind of held this immense power over all this information and the public opinion. So and while the movie is exaggerated for like action movie purposes, it's just the core themes about the dangers of that mass media control and just the public's kind of appetite for sensationalism just rings truer now, I think, than ever. Um, and that's kind of sad, But it's a cautionary tale that was kind of wrapped in this whole muscle bound action package. But this movie is a cult classic. Like I said, it's got a huge fan base, and while perhaps not as universally acclaimed, or maybe even financially successful as Terminator 2 or Jurassic Park, or which which you kind of competed against in themes loosely, but not the budget or whatever. The Running Man is absolutely a beloved, I think, cult classic, among action fans and Arnold fans and all that. And it's just it's peak '80s Arnold, just the taking down these like larger than life villains and delivering these kind of over the top violence and the one liners, and it's just unique premise, and it's memorable characters really stand out here. Just like when they're introducing the stalkers, like that's always so hilarious to me for some reason. Like here's Sub-Zero, now Plane Zero. So like that's the line that Arnold gives after he kills Sub-Zero. So it's like it's just and like I said, just everything surrounding those whole characters of those stalkers is just so very 80s. If you grew up in the 80s, if you grew up in the 90s and you're watching those movies from the 80s, you definitely would get what I'm saying, because it just definitely was just that whole era just had a very unique vibe to it, and just everything surrounding this movie just fits in perfectly with that. And it's another movie, towards the late '80s that just again solidified Arnold's status as one of the kings of this high concept action, right along with Sylvester Stallone, and just this one, just often has that kind of satirical or sci-fi slant to it, as some of his other films did. And just while the concept of this like movie and the game within the movie, I think it just these kind of death games existed, I think, before, most notably like in the source material, because like I said, this was a Stephen King novel that was written under the pseudonym Richard Bachman. So the Running Man just really brought a specific, highly visible, action-packed version of that to a wider audience. And just there's a lot of influence from this that can be seen in other books and movies and video games, and just kind of feature these heroes that are forced to participate in these like deadly televised competitions for survival or freedom, like Battle Royale or the Hunger Games. But they they might be more like direct descendants of their books, but the Running Man's films visual style, just the characters here, the show's host, all the stalkers, um, and just that focus on the spectacle of that hunt really left a mark on the genre, in my opinion. Um, and Arnold really kind of his physique is really like is front and center in this film. Because the Running Man also relies heavily on Arnold's kind of charisma and that comedic timing for the entertainment value for this movie, and just his delivery, of the one-liners, his reaction, uh, to just all the absurd things that are going on, and just his ability to really make you care about Ben Richards as a character, despite this kind of wild situation. It proves that he was, more than just this bodybuilder turned into an actor. Um, he was just, a genuine movie star, capable of anchoring even the craziest concepts. Um, but I guess in conclusion, The Running Man is more than just an 80s action film where, Arnold beats up guys in funny costumes. Um, it's, surprisingly very insightful, uh, that insightful commentary, on media culture that just, that happened to star the biggest action hero on the planet. And just, its legacy is its forward thinking themes, that enduring status, as a cult favorite, and it's a secure place as a required viewing, I think, for any true Arnold fan. I mean, look, is it perfect? No, it's. I don't think it's be considered a perfect film. Like Predator, is a perfect film to me. Terminator 2, those are perfect films to me. I mean, there plot holes to this in this movie. Sure, I mean, is it subtle? Hardly. I mean, but does it deliver exactly what you want from an Arnold movie? Set in this kind of dystopian future with these killers that are and this manipulative game show host. Absolutely. I mean that's everything that makes this movie work. And just, it is just a classic, I think, when it comes to Arnold's 80s films. Really showcases him at his best. And it's because it's got the action, it's got the one-liners, the whole presence of that whole 80s vibe, and just Arnold himself, and just it's even something interesting to say, underneath all the mayhem that's going on here. And for my money, it's a total package when it comes to an Arnold film in the 80s. And so I say it's definitely a must watch. Um, so if you've never seen The Running Man, go check it out. I mean, and tell me what you think about it, because I mean, like I said, it is very eerie how it's all kind of like plays into the media and everything, and it's manipulative of people. It just see if it and compare that to like nowadays with like social media and people who are kind of like drawn to all that, and just need like that. Just there's people out there that need that attention just because of social media. So like, yeah, I mean, it's definitely something interesting to think about when watching this film. Um, but the next movie we're going to talk about is it's Stallone's turn this time, and this was a movie that I had never seen before from Stallone. Much like how on last night's episode, there was an Arnold film that I'd never seen in Raw Deal. Well, this is a Stallone film this time that I had never seen before, and this is Lockup from 1989. Um, so Lockup tells the story of Frank Leone, who's played by Sylvester Stallone here. And he's this model prisoner near the end of his sentence in this kind of minimum security prison. He's a really stand-up guy. He's respected by all these inmates and the guards alike. And he has this loving girlfriend on the outside that's waiting for him. Um, and his only crime was a minor one that committed years ago out of a sense of justice. But it landed him in all this hot water, with the system. And in his last final few weeks, just of course something has to go wrong, and just all of that is shattered when he's abruptly transferred in the middle of the night to this place called Gateway Prison, and it's this maximum security hellhole. It's run by this cruel, sadistic warden, Warden Drumgoole, who is played by Donald Sutherland. And Drumgoole isn't just this tough correctional guy, this officer or whatever. He really harbors this kind of deeply personal vendetta against Leone. And years prior, Leone had escaped Drumgoole's previous prison, and in doing so, exposed the warden all these brutal methods that the warden was capable of, and just leading Drumgoole's to his demotion and transfer to this new prison, Gateway Prison. Now, with Leone just weeks shy of freedom, like I said, Drumgoole is using this absolute power to make Leone's life a living nightmare. He's determined to break him physically, mentally, and spiritually, and ultimately ensure that he never sees the outside world again. So the film meticulously details Drumgoole's psychological warfare and that physical torment, and Leone is subjected to this relentless, harassment and just kind of these arbitrary rule changes. He's forced, like to this like back-breaking labor, dismantling, reassembling a car in the rain, and just these brutal beatings that is designed to look like accidents. There's stage fights, and just the constant threat, of harm to his friends within the prison walls as well, like First Base, who was played by Larry Romano, and then Dallas, who is played by Tom Sizemore here. And this might be my favorite role that I've ever watched from Tom Sizemore. I thought he did an excellent job in this as Dallas. He's a very likable character. But despite all the relentless pressure, Frank Leone, refuses to break from all of this that he's been put through. He embodies that classic Stallone underdog spirit. He's knocked down repeatedly, but he's never staying down. He finds strength in camaraderie with his fellow inmates, and just he holds on to that hope of freedom and reuniting with his girlfriend on the outside. So the movie builds tension, beautifully, I think, as Leone navigates through all of Drumgoole's traps, desperately trying to survive, his sentence, without giving the warden a reason to extend it or anything worse. So it all culminates in this very thrilling, although perhaps slightly, unrealistic final confrontation where Leone finally gets to face his tormentor head on, not just for himself, but for everyone that the warden has wronged. And this isn't a traditional action movie with explosions every 5 minutes and all that. It's more of a character-driven prison drama, centered on this kind of battle of wills and that enduring strength, of one man against all this cruelty that he's facing. And the director here is John Flynn. Now, John Flynn was often associated with these kind of tough, often gritty genre pictures. He's well not possibly not a household name or anything compared to some other directors out there. He's definitely, I think, well respected among film fans. Particularly those who kind of appreciate that solid, excuse me, that solid craftsmanship in like thrillers and action films. Um, oh, my throat was getting a little bit dry there. I don't know what's going on, but but he's probably best known for directing this movie. My dad is a big fan of it, called Out for Justice from 1991, which stars Steven Seagal. So my dad is a huge Steven Seagal fan. So that's one I do know for sure. But other than that, this is the only other one that I think that I have seen from John Flynn. So, and I really, really like this one a lot. But you know, as far as the legacy and the impact of Lockup, um, particularly from Sylvester Stallone fans' perspective, um, I don't think that this movie was like a massive critical or commercial hit at the time. But I think I've heard a lot of people talk about this movie like before I'd even seen it, and so I think for like a lot of Stallone fans, it seems like this is generally loved by a lot of Stallone fans, and I feel like it's very underrated in my opinion. In as far as an entry in his filmography, it would be like one of those movies that you call like a deep cut. I think that really showcases Stallone's strengths, beyond just explosive action. Um, it's a staple, I think, for rewatching too. Like this is another movie that even though this is my first time, I'm really excited about watching it again. This is another one that I definitely will be rewatching in the future. And it feels like a comfort movie in its kind of own way as well. Just because that Stallone's character is going to endure in all of this. So um, I feel like that this movie also kind of showcased a lot of Stallone's performing range as well. And so because it was more than just like that physical presence that you see in a lot of his films. There's plenty of that, especially in the workout, the forced labor scenes, and all that. But Stallone really delivers a performance, I think, more within that internal conflict, kind of like over the top. He has to convey like frustration and fear, and this hope and pain, and within all this in his character in Lockup. His scenes with Donald Sutherland are, I think, particularly impactful because you can cut the tension with a knife in that last scene between Stallone and Sutherland. It just proves that more so that Stallone could carry, a drama heavily rely on his psychological warfare, and emotional resonance, other than just that physical action that would, he's known for, like in the Rocky films and the Rambo films and all that. And just it just really underscored his ability to just kind of portray that ethical core of that underdog, fighting an injustice. But putting aside all the Stallone factor for just a minute, I think that Lockup, it also stands as a solid entry just in the prison drama genre. It explores all these themes of just like the institutional power, and corruption, just that survival instinct, and just the bonds that are formed in that kind of setting, under that kind of extreme stress and everything that they go through by being in prison. It utilizes that setting effectively to create all this tension and just to highlight all that dehumanizing aspects of just being incarcerated. I think so. yeah, I mean, it's definitely, it stands out as one of the more entertaining like prison dramas that I've seen. I mean, like I don't think I would put it over something like Shawshank Redemption, but this one's definitely really good. I feel like this is very underrated, especially as a Stallone film. But as I kind of compared this, to certain things like Rocky or the Rambo like First Blood, this one's definitely not all going to get that mainstream recognition like those films. But this one is, I think found a foundational film, for kind of understanding that depth, of Stallone's connection with his audience. It's a very raw and intense, and kind of inspiring story, about this kind of fight for his own dignity and, in the face of like, overwhelming oppression, led by this kind of powerful, committed performance from Stallone. Um, so yeah, any true Stallone fan, like this is definitely one you have to see. If you're like me, you had never seen this one before, definitely check this one out. Don't let this one fly under your radar. Lockup is just it's a visceral reminder, I think, of why we root for the underdog and believe in the strength of human spirit. So yeah, go watch it. I don't think you will be disappointed. Now to get to the which one I would choose over the other. So the Running Man versus Lockup. So first, let me go ahead and just I pull up the poll that I did. So I think only one person participated in this round. So it's not, it's basically going to be up to my choice. Well, this person's choice as well, which is my cousin Jeremy. It's definitely going to factor in as well, but it's funny enough, his choices for this round were also my choices. So yeah, so I know there's definitely going to be definite winners here in this round. So my cousin Jeremy, he chose between these two, he chose the Running Man, and that would also be my choice, and um, not just because I've seen the Running Man more and I've just known of it since I was a kid, and against the fact that this is the first time watch for me for the movie Lockup. Um, just I can watch a movie one time and then watch another movie just one time, and I can tell you right off the bat which one I like better. But the thing is, as the years go by, sometimes your opinions change. Um, but like I could definitely tell you that between these two, uh, I lean more towards the Running Man because it's just just everything, the whole like dystopian future, the sci-fi and action aspect, just also with the one-liners from Arnold. Um, Not to discredit Lockup in any way, but just that's something that I'm more in tune with that kind of style and that genre. Although I do enjoy the serious aspect of Lockup, at the prison drama aspect of that all. It's it's very cool to me. It's very entertaining. A very amazing movie. But I have to give the edge to the Running Man. So as far as this round goes, it's Arnold 1 so far and Stallone 0. So now moving on to the next matchup. So we're back to Arnold again. So this time we're kind of starting to lean into this kind of comedic element era that Arnold was kind of leaning into. And this is from 1988. This is Red Heat. I love this movie. So Red Heat is, this action thriller, but it has this kind of like sense of comedy in it as well, as they threw like this whole like this is from the era where a lot of these buddy cop movies were coming out, and just that whole concept was really just taking this really global stage. With this one particularly because it kind of leverages into that Cold War tension. Because Arnold plays a Russian in this movie. And just I think that premise is brilliant, in the simplicity, but it's effective in its execution. So Ivan Danko, played by Arnold here, is the stone-faced, and possibly tough police captain from Moscow, Russia, and he's tasked with bringing this notorious Georgian drug smuggler and murderer, Victor Rasta, I think it's Victor Rasta, who's back. He's trying to bring him back to the Soviet Union after Victor escapes custody in this brutal shootout. So Victor has fled to Chicago in the United States, and this forces Danko, who's the epitome of Soviet discipline and austerity, in just to go to the heart of capitalist America. Excuse me. And so when Victor's transfer goes violently wrong, Danko finds himself forced to reluctantly partner with this loud, wisecracking, distinctly American detective Art Ridzik, who's played by James Belushi or Jim Belushi. Excuse me, sorry guys. So the film follows Danko and Ridzik as they track Victor through these grimy streets of Chicago. And the core of the movie isn't just the hunt; it's the clash of these cultures and these personalities. And Danko is rigid, very stoic, by the book, and he's a man of few words too, and just this he has this very immense physical presence about him, and just absolute dedication to his mission. But Jim Belushi's character, Ridzik, on the other hand, is very cynical. He's very talkative, rebellious, and just far more comfortable bending rules and cracking jokes. So he's the biggest part, like comedic element of this movie. The where all the humor factors in, and I'm not the biggest fan of Jim Belushi. But I really do like his character in this. I mean, there's some really funny parts between him and Arnold. But like the whole joke, like the "fuck your mother's ass" and all this, just different lines that come out of nowhere because it just really like works so well because Arnold is playing this Russian who is not used to American culture or their lingo or anything. So, and just that whole deadpan delivery that comes from Arnold, like in a lot of his roles, just makes that even more hilarious. But just there's this kind of initial hostility, between Danko and Ridzik, and just, there's this kind of that initial hostility and that mutual kind of suspicion slowly evolve into this respect for one another, and that comes from these like shootouts that they're both involved in, these car chases and just navigating all this complexities of both American justice system and just this dangerous international criminal network. So the story is pretty straightforward. Find Victor, bring him to justice. But it's all elevated by that kind of fish out of water elements. For Danko, the dynamic between Arnold and Jim Belushi here, who are the leads, and just it's very surprisingly grounded for an Arnold film. Just that that depiction of violence and the criminal underworld. It explores all these themes of like duty and cultural differences and just finding common ground, despite kind of having like this kind of different personalities and ideas. It's all wrapped together in this really like well-directed action package. And speaking of being well-directed, so the director here is the legendary Walter Hill. So for action and thriller, fans out there, Walter Hill is a name that should be synonymous with those fans, because that lean and tough and just visually distinctive, filmmaking that he's known for. He's known for creating kind of atmospheric, character driven genre pictures. Um, often focusing on like male relationships within like and friendships. I mean, like that, within gritty, kind of stylized worlds. Um, and like those friendships, they always start off as friendships in his films as well. There's sometimes like kind of adversaries, and sometimes kind of fraternal. But I think some of Walter Hill's most iconic works include one of my favorite films of all time, The Warriors from 1979. The Warriors. I've reviewed that here on the channel in the past. Just that it's a cult classic. About these New York City gangs trying to make their way back to their home, and it's just that movie is really known for all its memorable visuals and just very unique structure. And the movie 48 Hours from 1982, which was a part of the whole buddy cop, subgenre. And 48 Hours is widely considered one of the pioneering films of that buddy cop genre. Just launching the film careers of like Eddie Murphy, opposite Nick Nolte. It's a blend of action and humor and just these two clashing partners who kind of set a template for that whole buddy cop genre and all those films to follow. Um, and Walter Hill's style often kind of features these sharp, often kind of minimal dialogue, and that's seen a lot in The Warriors. Which it's a focus on that kind of professional um, competency, I guess. Especially among like criminals or law enforcement. These like strong, visual composition, just a certain level of of cynicism in there too. Um, his characters are just often these figures that are operating within these kind of clearly defined, harsh worlds. Um, his ability to kind of blend, character study with intense action really made him a perfect fit, I think, for Red Heat. And it allowed Arnold to kind of embody that very stoic, almost mythic figure of Danko, while Walter Hill crafted the whole tense atmosphere and just all the action sequences surrounding it. Hey man, what's going on? I haven't seen you in here in a while. How you been doing, brother? Glad to have you here. You big Arnold. I know you're a big Arnold and Stallone fan. That's something we talked about a lot when we were in school together. So glad to have you here, man. If you haven't checked out round one, the video I did last night, you have to go check it out as well, man. But glad to have you here tonight, man. But let's go ahead and talk about like the legacy and the impact as far as Red Heat is concerned. So, this is another movie from Arnold. While perhaps not on the absolute higher tier, the cultural impact like Terminator made, or Predator, or Commando, or films like that. Red Heat really holds this kind of significant and enduring legacy. I think particularly within the action genre and Schwarzenegger's career, because it really focused on that whole Cold War image, within Russia and all that. So this is probably one of the most prominent Hollywood action films of the era to feature a Soviet character as the hero. Although one is chasing this criminal. And at a time when all these Soviet characters were almost exclusively, portrayed as villains, The character that Arnold plays, Danko, really offered this kind of fascinating, um, look at a Soviet lawman. You know, while he's clearly different, and kind of embodies this very contrasting ideology to Ridzik, the Chicago cop. The film, I think, ultimately, finds that common ground in their shared goal of justice. Um, which is kind of a reflection of the thawing relations towards the end of the Cold War, and it really, it tackled a lot of complex, politics, but through this kind of purely entertaining action lens. So it's really, really interesting, everything surrounding that film, just that whole idea of like having a Russian main character who's the hero, when just it was just that was not common back then. Uh, but going back to the whole like buddy cop genre thing, so like I said, this is building on the foundation that Walter Hill himself helped lay with 48 Hours. Red Heat injected more of a compelling, international dimension into the buddy cop formula. Just that culture clash between Danko and Ridzik in this isn't just regional, like LA versus New York, where it's this ideological and it's national. It elevated that standard dynamic and just provided much of the film's humor and just that dramatic friction. It's I think it's a notable entry, in the genre precisely because of that kind of unique pairing and setting here. Um, and just it also provided Arnold with just an opportunity to slightly stretch beyond that wisecracking like superheroes or not really superheroes, but it's funny because I was thinking about Commando when I said that, because like I mentioned that on last night's show. It's like it's almost in Commando, it's almost like John Matrix is a superhero, but he's not. But you know what I mean? Like just you look at it like because he just seems untouchable and just immortal, and like everything, he doesn't get hurt at all until the very end when in that fight with Bennett. But I don't want to get off and talk about Commando again. But like I'm just saying, like this is just Arnold's opportunity to kind of stretch beyond those types of characters, like in Commando, or the reluctant heroes of like in Terminator. So the character here, Ivan Danko in Red Heat, relies more on this silent intensity, this kind of this physical presence and that sheer, like determination, than on like one-liners. Though he does have a few one-liners in this that are kind of iconic, like I said, the go fuck your mother's ass. That's one of my favorite lines in the entire movie. It proved that he could anchor a film, though, playing this character who is initially at least almost very alien to everyone else in the film, and just less relatable to the American audience. So it just really showed his star power transcended that basic hero stereotype that he was known for, and his look in this film with like the fur hat, his physique in a suit, and Riznik always calls him Gumby because he wears like the green blazer and everything, so he calls him Gumby. And but just all of that I think is just instantly recognizable to fans of Arnold and of this movie. And just going back to Walter Hill, his direction in this, really infused that film with a memorable visual style. Just particularly its kind of use of the color red, in lighting and set design and costumes. Just symbolized both that Soviet Union and like the danger and heat, the just and what's called red heat. I think this was very deliberate, a very deliberate aesthetic choice that gives that film a distinct look that sets it apart, from many other action films of the era. Um, so, and it's not as like packed with the famous lines, like I said, like a Terminator, Predator, or anything like that. But just this film is highly, I think, rewatchable for fans who appreciate Arnold's performance in it, just that chemistry that he has with Jim Belushi, and just all the very solid action set pieces here. It's um, I've heard a lot of people say that this one is underrated when it comes to Arnold's film. Um, I don't feel like it's overrated or underrated. I just feel like it's a solid entry. It's just right there in the middle. It's not one of my favorite Arnold films, um, but I really do enjoy it a lot. I mean, it's one that I've watched many times over the years. Um, I think for some people that have not seen this film, are definitely overlooking it. Because I think it is a highlight of Arnold's career. In the late '80s. Um, and it's a very fun movie. I recommend checking it out if you've never seen it. And just in conclusion, I guess Red Heat is um, it just provided that Arnold with this role that it just perfectly kind of weaponized him in this very unique presence and this accent against this backdrop of like Cold War intrigue and that cross cultural comedy. Um, its legacy I think lies in it being very innovative take on that buddy cop genre. So like I talked about how most Russian characters during this time period were always portrayed as villains in films. So it was very innovative in that sense, to where Arnold playing the main character is the hero. He's also Russian, um, and just it's fascinating. That use that whole Cold War setting. And it's that the visual flair that it brings. It's just I think it's an incredible entry, in Arnold's filmography. So definitely check this one out if you've never seen Red Heat before. Um, I highly recommend it. Um, Daniel, you said Commando or Cobra. Who's winning that fight? Awesome movies, these two, and Van Damme. Yeah, like Van Damme is another guy. Like I'll eventually probably talk about him at some point too here on the channel, because there's a lot of his movies. Like Bloodsport is probably one of my favorite action movies of all time. And yeah, he's amazing in that, and Lionheart, and Cyborg, Time Cop. There's so many good Van Damme movies, man. Um, but yeah, like so if you didn't watch last night's episode, like spoiler alert, Commando or Cobra, like I choose Commando. I love both those movies so much in their own different ways. But just for me, like Commando is the better of the two. And then I also covered Over the Top and Raw Deal last night. So out of those two, I chose Over the Top because that's my favorite Stallone film of all time, and and it's another kind of situation where like I was tonight on tonight's show, I was comparing The Running Man versus Lockup. So Lockup was a first time watch for me, and I've seen Running Man countless times. Same thing with last night. Like I've seen Over the Top countless times, and going against Raw Deal, which is a movie, was the first time watch for me as well. Um, it may seem biased, but it's definitely not. It's just like because out of watching those two films, I can tell you straight away, which one is my I like better. Even if Raw Deal was my first time watch, if I liked it better than Over the Top, I would definitely straight up just tell you, yeah, I liked it better, even though I've seen Over the Top hundreds of times. But it's just not the case there, because Over the Top, like I said, my favorite Stallone film of all time. So I thought it was an easy choice against Raw Deal. And just the same thing with Running Man going up against Lockup. But yeah, I just sorry, I started talking about these things and I started getting excited and I just got to get off on a tangent. So But I gotta stay the course, guys. So moving on now to the next movie tonight, and actually the last movie I'm going to be talking about tonight in this matchup against Red Heat is the Stallone portion of this matchup, and this is another great film from Stallone. And funny enough, it's a buddy cop movie as well. And this time, Stallone is teaming up with another one of the greatest uh, actors I think of all time. In action and drama and all types of other horror, all types of genres out there. Kurt Russell, and this is Tango and Cash from 1989. Um, so where do I even start with Tango and Cash? I mean, this is a movie that I've watched again and again and again. And for a Stallone fan, it's got everything that you want. Maybe even things that you didn't realize you wanted. So Stallone here, as Ray Tango, and this is a slightly different kind of role for him in the 80s. He's this sharp, sophisticated, by the book cop. He wears glasses. He drives a really nice car. But don't let all that fool you, because when the action kicks off, he's still that same powerhouse that we know and love. There's even like this in the opening scene. There's this really funny line, like after he shoots at the truck that's coming towards him that Robert Zadar is driving, and they stop and they come crashing out the front windows. All the other cops arrive and they're like, there's this one cop that gets in his face like, "Who do you think you are?" And there's other cop like standing up at the top of the truck says he thinks he's Rambo, which is and Tango proceeds to say, "Rambo is a pussy." So, and I feel like that's the only person that could ever say that is Stallone himself. It's just a really funny kind of like nod to another role that he played, and I thought that was really cool that they threw that in there. But just he brings that underlying intensity, I think. But he also gets to show off his comedic timing as well, especially playing off of Kurt Russell here. Kurt Russell plays Gabriel Cash, and man, it's just what a pairing here. I feel like this is almost like unfair in a way because having Stallone and Kurt Russell together versus Arnold and Jim Belushi. I think it's going to be an obvious choice which I want to choose out of these two. But just Kurt Russell in this is the perfect foil to Tango, to Stallone's character Tango, because Cash is this scruffy, street smart, loose cannon, and just the chemistry that him and Stallone have in this film is really is so funny. It's so cool. I love it. Just the whole premise here relies on these two absolute legends just hating each other's guts initially, and just being forced to work together, and it just delivers, I think, in spades because their banner throughout the film is hilarious. They're constantly trying to one up each other. It's just and just watching them, slowly start as the film progresses to respect each other is really just why this movie I think is so beloved by not only myself but tons of fans, everywhere. So the plot of this film is just completely ridiculous, though, but in the best way. I say that in the best possible way. So two of LA's top narcotics detectives they're framed by this crime lord and just thrown into this supermax prison, with all the guys that they put away. And naturally they have to break out and clear their names. So it's really a classic setup for like pure 80s action movie mayhem. just the prison break sequence alone is so cool and very epic. I think um, it's just a lot of danger involved. It's full of tension, and once they're out, the movie really just becomes this kind of wall to wall, balls to the wall action set piece. Like it's car chases and shootouts and just a lot of just laugh out loud moments as well. And Terry Hatcher in this that plays Tango's sister, Catherine or Kiki, her stripper name. Whew, she is fucking smoking in this. Like this is one of like the best, what where Terry Hatcher was the best, and just the character of Jack Palance has in here, where he's the main villain, Perret. Just that whole final confrontation with him in the movie is just it's just that kind of grand explosive finale that the movie needed. So what makes this great from a fan perspective? You see Stallone at his peak 80s physique, doing his thing, taking hits, dishing them out, delivering those classic one-liners with that unique Stallone vibe about himself. And his character Tango, might be more polished than Rocky or Rambo, but just that core grit and determination are still there. Plus seeing him in that buddy cop setup, just sharing the screen so effectively with another huge star like Kurt Russell is fantastic. It's action packed, it's funny, it's got a great soundtrack. It just feels like a product of its time in the best way. It's not trying to be deep or serious or anything. It's just trying to entertain the hell out of you, and it totally succeeds with me at least. I think it's an absolute must watch for any Stallone fan. And funny enough, because Arnold played a Russian in Red Heat, the last film that we talked about. The director here is actually a real Russian named Andrei Konchalovsky, and he was this Russian filmmaker who kind of had a varied career, working in both Russian and international cinema. I mean, he was known for these like early Russian films that I didn't even know about until I did some research on him, and he kind of often explored like very complex social and psychological themes in those works, and then in the late 70s and into the 1980s, he was transitioned to Hollywood to work on more Americanized films in Hollywood. And I think that his most acclaimed American film is probably Runaway Train from 1985. That had John Voight and Eric Roberts. But while he directed the majority of Tango and Cash, the film's production was famously troubled. Involving this kind of studio interference and rewrites and reshoots. That were reportedly handled by these other directors, like a guy named Albert Magnoli, who directed the reshoots and the ending, and just all kinds of other producers were involved with this. So it was, apparently during the making of this, it was this huge mess. But I think because of this, the finished film of Tango and Cash is often seen as less reflective of Konchalovsky's distinct style compared to films like Runaway Train, or the other films I guess he did when he was in Russia. But Tango and Cash, it wasn't like a critical darling, didn't reach like iconic status. Of films like Lethal Weapon or Die Hard. And, But I think it definitely holds a particular place in film history. And amongst fans, especially Stallone fans and Kurt Russell fans, and just that whole buddy cop thing. This movie arrived at the very end of the '80s, um, which was arguably representing one of the final major examples of that decade's dominant buddy cop, action comedy formula, and it stars two massive, highly paid action stars that were so well known in the '80s in Sylvester Stallone and Kurt Russell. Um, I think from a lot of fans, it's often viewed as kind of definitive, uh, slightly self-aware and over the top, send off for that whole particular era of that buddy cop genre. And it has a huge cult following too nowadays. And said there was a lot of mixed reviews when it was released. But just over the years, it's kind of developed this huge cult following, and fans really appreciate, its commitment to the pure, unadulterated action movie fun. It's, those one-liners. I mean, and the one-liners are like tenfold in this, between Stallone and Kurt Russell. I mean, it's just nonstop entertainment, and just there's a strong chemistry, between those two guys, and it's like shocking to me that they didn't do a lot more roles in films together, because like that chemistry was like magic. And now I think that's why I love this film so much, because because Stallone and Schwarzenegger are like my two favorite actors of all time. But Kurt Russell is definitely in the top five. He's there as well. Because like my favorite movie he's in, The Thing. Just his uh, constant working with John Carpenter, who's my favorite director. They did The Thing together. They did Escape from New York, Big Trouble in Little China, and so forth. It's just when you see like chemistry like that, like how like Kurt Russell has with John Carpenter, and that it works so well, you're obviously going to continue working together to put out more projects. So I would love to know why there weren't more projects with Kurt Russell and Sylvester Stallone together, because that chemistry they have in Tango Cash is just amazing. And it's so nostalgic for me, because I grew up with this movie. My dad loved this movie. Um, and I think that's a big reason why, I came such a fan of this movie. Um, but yeah, just like this film is fantastic. It's and it feels like another one of those films. Like it's a time capsule of that era of the 1980s, and that pop culture, filmmaking. Just from the fashion and the hairstyles to the all the synthesizer music in these movies, just the practical effects, just everything. It just perfectly captures that whole aesthetic of that era. And you know, in essence, I guess Tango Cash's legacy isn't about that critical acclaim or those box office records, um, but more about being this beloved, highly rewatchable piece of '80s action history that I think that perfectly paired these two charismatic stars in this really story tailor made for pure, explosive entertainment. And for Stallone fans, it's another movie that I feel like is essential as a part of his evolution. And just when you're watching these movies, like this is something that's essential to watch. And it really showed that he had this kind of versatility about his acting career too, and being involved in this whole buddy cop realm. While still delivering all that kind of action intensity that that we love about it. But so as when it comes to Tango Cash versus Red Heat, um, so like I said, my cousin Jeremy was the only one that participated in the poll that I did on my Facebook and social media. So and he chose Tango Cash, and that's also my choice as well. So yeah, Tango Cash is just I think it easily beats Red Heat in my opinion. And not to discredit Red Heat because I love that film as well. Just as I talked about it earlier, you'll understand why I love that film. But just I just think the edge here came from just that chemistry between Sylvester Stallone and Kurt Russell, and just it's hard to beat. You know, when it comes to buddy cop movies, this has got to be one of the best, in my opinion. So again, much like how last night in round one, the score at the end of round two is 1-1. So making the score now 2-2 between Schwarzenegger and Stallone. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I know this was fairly short video compared to the ones I usually do, but just where I started this one so late, because I started this right after WWE Monday Night Raw ended, so I was like, well, I don't want to stay up too late now. I got work again tomorrow, so I'm just going to try to do this really quick, and and I'm not sure how it will go for the rest of the week up until Thursday when I finish this. But the other videos I may do may be about the same length. I don't know. We'll see. Depends on how much I talk about them. But if thank you guys for checking out this video, whether if you were here in the live chat like my buddy Daniel. I appreciate you being here for this episode, Daniel, and anybody that's watching on the replay. Appreciate you guys as well just for taking the time to check out this video. I will have one again tomorrow night for 4 more films, 2 from Stallone, 2 from Schwarzenegger. We'll see how that pans out tomorrow night. But I guess that's it for this video, guys. And just I want to thank everyone so far on this journey. Like I said, I'm almost at 200 movies in this 500 movies in 2025. And just appreciate everybody that's been with me so far on this journey. Just hear me, go on and on about these movies. It just means a lot to me that you're just taking the time to check out these videos and listen to my opinions on these films. That's super cool to me. It's something I've wanted to do for many years, and I'm just loving this. I'm loving it. Sometimes it takes a lot of work into this channel, like more than I thought it would. But man, just getting to watch these movies and just share my opinions with you guys on these films of how I feel about them. That's just that's really really cool to me. But go ahead and drop me a comment below on this video if you'd like. Which of these 4 movies that I talked about tonight is your favorite? And as always, if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. I'd really appreciate that. And also, if you're new to the channel, just hit that subscribe button to catch more videos from me like this one. And of course, click that bell for any kind of future notifications. But like I said, I will be doing this every night this week up until Thursday. Thursday will be the last round for Schwarzenegger versus Stallone. So I hope to see you guys back here tomorrow night. As I said, I'll be covering 4 more movies, 2 for Stallone, 2 for Schwarzenegger, and we'll see where the score is at the end of that round. But with all that said, I guess I'm Crater. This is Crater Mania. I love you guys. Have a good night.